Well, before we go into your story, I love talking about perfectionism. I feel like I could have a whole podcast about this. And you brought it up in another interview that your relationship with perfectionism has changed so much over the years. And I feel like sometimes in business, it forces you to realize you cannot be perfect or things just don't happen. So I'm just curious, what was that pinnacle time for you when you realized I can't be perfect and nothing can be perfect in business? Like, I'd love to hear all about that.
Well, I need to record the soundbite and like play that as a mantra.
That's why I'm asking you. I'm like, I need the reminder.
So I love that you brought this up because I think I remember talking about this years ago, if we're talking about 4 or 5 plus years ago. And I want to say like about 7 or 8 years ago, I had this moment that has stuck with me ever since. And it's evolved so much. I used to, with our email marketing, be like totally OCD. I would fix every word, every image. I would go in there and redo all the design. And one day I was like, oh, I wonder if I A/B tested my work, if there would be a difference. And like I took something that was good, totally solid, and had to spend a couple more hours making it perfect, and the revenue was the same. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I started A/B testing like a lot of my like perfectionism, and found that this is like particular to marketing, but it really like it expanded into so much more, that sometimes it was better to just like do things and move along than stop and slow myself. And I think it was a really big breakthrough for me in our growth. And I started looking at things as like buckets of perfectionism, like product. Okay, I can be obsessive about product. Like right now, I have a product that my PD team would just love for me to approve because we're getting out of our timeline. But like, I'm testing 1 or 2 more things, and I'm going to take my time. And if that means we ship a week later, we're going to ship it a week later. As opposed to, I just had like a bunch of emails and a whole like all of our campaigns for Labor Day and what we're doing for the year. And like, yeah, okay, maybe I want to tweak this, but like, it's okay. It looks good. And so that was just like such a breakthrough that moved into so much. I think I'm in a renewed battle with perfectionism. And I saw, I've seen some of your other interviews that have like landed so much, and specifically around this idea of like always like questioning, like, am I doing this right? Because now I think what's like triggering this perfectionism is we've scaled so much that like the scale of the problems is so great that it makes me question everything. Like sometimes I'll sit back and say like, oh wow, I'm making like a $2 million decision right now. And I used to labor over like a $1,000, a $100 choice. And so it like activates that perfectionism feeling because the stakes are so much higher and I want to do everything perfect. And I can't. And that's, it's a whole new challenge to accept exactly what you started with, which is like, I can't be perfect when everything just feels so much higher risk, higher reward, higher risk.
Yeah. And what's so interesting, and your business is, much larger than even mine, but I'm noticing it in our like slow growth, is the problems get more, the details get more. So if you are that same person, because I was there, like, let's get the color correct early on. I'm like, you literally will not have any brain capacity or time to be like running the business. And we're self-funded. And I'm like, my husband reminds me, he's like, if you had investors, they would be like, why is the CEO focusing on this? Because we do so much content as well. And I can see myself being like, is that the right way to say it? Like, you need to pick and choose. And there's so much going on in the business. Like at your scale, you're doing multi-million-dollar decisions that you can't be fixated on every little, you'll lose your mind. So,
well, I may have. So,
yeah, I know that ship has sailed. I mean, I'm learning that.
Yeah, it's already gone. So there's nothing left to lose.
Oh my gosh, so good. But I love the fact that you were A/B testing and you noticed, because even for us, just specifically about email, we are like, our text-based, very simple text-based emails perform better than designed beauty, and I think there's a time and place for it both. But me and my co-founder are like, if the content's strong, we're good with text-based. Like
that, I think another area of the business where I let things go and that has really helped scale us is with paid. Because I decided like, listen, we have brand guidelines. There's things we'll never do. We have like fundamentals of who we are. And I got really clear on those. And if an ad maybe doesn't match what I think it should look like, isn't doing what I think, but it's performing, you know what? That's not my choice anymore. So I look at paid social, but like that is up to the algorithm to decide. What's working is working. And so I give myself touch points that are really important. Like last week I started obsessing over our customer care macros.
Yeah.
And like we have 4 people on our customer care team. But you know what? I made them all better and I feel good. So it's done. So
You
it's
know,
a
I
constant
love
battle.
that. Yes. And it's so funny because I'm laughing because that resonates. Like sometimes it'll be like the weekend or a Monday and you just kind of obsess over something so
Oh,
random and you get into it. And I'm like, is that us as founders? Everything is so out of our control that we try to like control certain things. Like, I don't know, but I just could so imagine myself going down a rabbit hole, like what you
it is.
said.
Today I decided to obsess about my calendar because I'm dealing with some other problems I can't control. So I was like, what can I control? I
Yeah.
can control where I'm going to be the second half of September.
Oh, that feels nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great.
I love it. Oh my gosh, so much fun. Well, I am, so curious and excited to go more into, your entrepreneurial journey, even before OSEA, with OSEA. But before doing that, I'd love to hear about your great grandmother. I look at you, I look at your mom, I look at your grandmother and your great grandmother, I believe, and you guys are just like incredible women. So tell me more about how maybe the OG matriarch really, influenced the legacy of like who you are today.
Well, I think my favorite story about her and I connect with and feels like so much, who I am, who we get to be as women in business, really connects to her. So in the 1920s, she read about this thing called chiropractics. She was like, "Oh, I want to become a chiropractor," and she was told that women could not become chiropractors and that chiropractic school is for men. And she was like, "Oh, okay." So she moved from New York to Iowa and showed up at the first day of classes
Wow.
and became the first female chiropractor. I think the founder's wife ended up becoming a chiropractor as well. And she just made up her mind, and that's what she was gonna that was what she was gonna do. And she was such a visionary and such a strong woman. And she actually is our inspiration for OSEA. She developed this thriving, she was so into wellness and healing and totally fringe over 100 years ago.
Wow.
And she developed this thriving chiropractic practice in Long Island, New York. And in her 40s, she injured herself and she couldn't treat her patients anymore. And she was very upset. And she had a dream one night that the ocean would heal her. And she yelled at my great grandfather to take her down to the water. It was November in New York. There was snow on the ground. And she started swimming and she swam every day and she started to see improvements. She was eventually healed, and she started the first that we know of polar bear club in the US, and she swam in the ocean 300 plus days a year. And she like all the bros are into ice. I mean, I actually like ice plunges myself, but she was tapped in so early. And she really built this truth in our family that the ocean is the source of healing and that our own connection to nature is so critical to our own sense of well-being. And the women in my family followed in her footsteps. My mom studied all different kinds of healing arts, ran a holistic wellness spa, and that's really what was her impetus to start OSEA. So it's all comes down to Elsa, which was my great grandmother's name, and she really. I always love to say, like, I think I have such a cool job that I just get to share the wisdom of the women in my family.
Oh my gosh. I have like goosebumps just hearing that. I mean, that is 1920s to be like the first. I mean, she was way ahead of her time. That's like incredible. I'm just so inspired and I love to see, what's come out from her with your mom and yourself. And I'm also curious about your childhood. It looks like, you were also very entrepreneurial. I know your mom also was very entrepreneurial. So I'm curious, like, was there a particular life moment or business moment that really made an impact on you growing up that you needed to maybe work hard and make money? Because that's always kind of been at the forefront, I think, for you, if I'm understanding correctly.
Oh, you really are like seeing this is a therapy session. Yeah, it was. So, I I think growing up primarily with a single mom, it was really clear that if we wanted something, we had to earn it. And the first thing that got me excited was I went to summer camp and I loved it. It was so much fun. It was just like such a party. And I realized that if I got a paper route, or actually two or three of them, I could pay for camp. And I found it so rewarding to earn money and like get to spend it. And I was like it I think it just like activated something in me, and I got really creative about how many paper routes I could do and like how efficiently I could stuff the papers and like how I could get people to help me and pay them and then still make a profit. So when I was a teenager and my mom was wanting to start OSEA, she'd spent literally decades in the kitchen with blending essential oils and seaweed. I was the oldest in the family, and I was like, "Oh, I'll help you. I love business," and that really started a journey. So, actually, we started it when I was in high school.
I mean, that's crazy. And your mom was doing it. Did she realize it could be like a legitimate business, or was she doing it on the side as like supporting her clients? Like, what did it look like for her at the time and you?
So, I think my mom and I always like to say we're the perfect team because she created the vision and the core foundation of the brand. And I brought the brand to life and built the business. And she always says everyone thought she was crazy because she knew it was going to be like, a global sensation.
Amazing.
And she built it to be just that. And everyone did think it was crazy because, we were selling like $10,000 a year when we started. And we just, kind of what the story looks like since then is we spent the first 15 years in our garage. We had some family members help us. We did everything. And we grew 10% a year from kind of nothing. So you can do the math there. I ended up hiring someone to work in the garage and pursued a different business. I helped start and build a hula hoop company.
So I have a question before we go into that, because you're seeing the business grow. It's not like global, but you're seeing momentum every year, 10%, growth. What were you thinking at the time? Were you like, you know what? I actually want to go do my own thing. Like what?
I was so frustrated because I like knew this was like 2000. There was no podcast like yours. There was nothing like a Shopify out of the box tool. There wasn't even Instagram. There wasn't TikTok. There was nothing. And I didn't even know how to raise money. Like I didn't understand what a VC was, but I was so frustrated because I really wanted to grow the business and I just didn't know how. And I loved what we were doing, but I had this like drive to grow differently. But it's just so crazy to think like that was 15 years ago and the level of access was just so different.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, nowadays business is obviously hard, but like the fact that there's Shopify, the fact that you can create free content to create awareness for your brand. I'm like, things were so different back then.
That really is what got us started. So I left, I came back just a few years later. At that point, OSEA was almost 100% a wholesale business. We sold in the spa market because that was an industry that my mom and I could really manage ourselves. And with the hula hoops, I had just incredible timing to learn all about D2C, which it wasn't even called that yet. Instagram was just starting, Facebook, and it was a really fun product to market. So I came back to OSEA. I thought I would just tinker for a few months and then go figure out what to do next, and built a website, started on Instagram, started working with influencers that they weren't called influencers at that time. It was just like sending free products to people with a following. And that was really what sparked and ignited the most recent chapter of our growth. In terms of scale, like we've gone from, I think we've grown like 8,000% since then. We have a team of almost 70. And so it has really escalated. And I bootstrapped that growth for about 6 years and then raised a small amount of outside capital after 2020 when I realized we needed just a little more security.
Totally. I have so many questions to unpack there. And one of them, I'm curious, was there with your hula hoop business, it seems like it was such a good experience. Instagram was coming direct to consumer, even though it wasn't called that, was becoming a thing selling online. What really pushed you to move away from that? Like, were there certain lessons that you learned where you're like, I'm kind of done here, or the business wasn't working? Like, I'd love to hear about that point of your life.
Yeah. So I joined someone who had started the business and became the CEO, and learned a lot about who I wanted to work with.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, it was such a good lesson. I think we all get to learn those lessons. But, ultimately, and I don't talk about this a lot, and I think it's really important to talk about it. I really felt like I failed there. I put my own money in. I was in debt when I left. I was so passion driven. I loved that business, and it really just wasn't a fit. And I knew it was time to move on. And everyone kept saying to me, like, oh, failure is a really good thing. Like, you're going to learn so much from this. And looking back, it really was what catalyzed me to be so focused on growing OSEA. I was like in debt and considering going bankrupt. And instead I was like, okay, I wonder how hard I could work to like make this work. And it just pushed me forward, and I learned so much, and it got me so focused and determined.
And I appreciate you sharing that because, we don't hear about the quote unquote failures. It's always like, oh, the business is killing it. And it's like, you don't hear all the mistakes that founders go through pre their business or during their business.
This woman, I was at like a founders weekend, and this woman pulled me aside, and she was like, I want to tell you about my failure, and it's okay, and you're going to learn so much. And she was so open and honest, and it was like, in that kind of environment where everyone's showing how great they are. And it stuck with me. I remember it so vividly. And she was right. Like, it is such a great lesson that failure is so devastating, and there's so much opportunity in it.
And how did you not, because you mentioned, and I so appreciate you being so, vulnerable and real about what you're experiencing. You're like, I didn't think I did a good job. How did that not hit your confidence as you were building, coming back to OSEA? Were you like, I got to figure it out? Like, did it impact your worth of doing something different in another business?
No, I was just really excited because I realized like I had this like fertile ground of this business
Yes.
that I had built when I was like literally a teenager figuring out how to do the accounting on QuickBooks, that I could go in and streamline everything. I kept saying in the early years when I came back, like, wow, this is so funny to be fixing things that I did a decade ago and like looking at my like younger self. So it actually, I think, gave me a lot of confidence that I learned and was able to grow from everything.
Gotcha. And sometimes you need to like leave to have a better, I don't
Yeah,
know, like even like if it's you're working for someone and you don't have a lot of work experience, it's like go out there in the world and see what it's like.
it's so true.
So you had some perspective, which is, cool to see. So going back to, you mentioned when you had kind of taken over, like let's say phase 2 of OSEA, you said 6 years from then, you guys were really bootstrap and you grew significantly. And, I'm so curious because you are still so nimble. And I know you weren't putting a lot of money to paid ads back there. Like you were mentioning, you sent the product to influencers, they weren't called influencers at the time. How are you guys really building the business? Because also you were so early in like clean beauty, clean skincare. Like people weren't really in that world too much, but you guys were still growing.
Oh, they
So
were not in that world at all. It was
yeah,
so like when we started, clean beauty wasn't even a thing.
yeah,
And one thing that I'm overall just so proud of about OSEA is since we launched, everything's still the same. Like our brand mission, our logo, our purpose. Some of our top 5 bestsellers launched in 1996. Our Ocean Cleanser, which is our top selling cleanser, 1996 launch. So it's been just like, I think, a combination of a lot of luck, a lot of vision, and a lot of hard work. Because throughout these decades, what we've been doing and what my mom so clearly knew was our path. And we just didn't waver from is now what consumers are seeking. And now it's called clean beauty. And now it's a very different conversation. You know, in the early days, we used to get criticized that the products were in glass, and we picked glass.
Really?
It was a recyclable source, and we would say that, and people would laugh at us. Or, you know, we didn't have the products in boxes because we were just selling them in stores. We'd ship them, they'd sit on a shelf and go home. So we felt a box was unnecessary. That shifted when we were shipping them to customers. So we needed to put them there was a point where it was no longer sustainable for us to hand wrap products in both its sustainability impact and the business impact. But yeah, it's really just been such a cool journey to be a part of building something that is now really part of the mainstream. Everyone knows what clean beauty is, and it's not revolutionary to say the skin is the largest organ in your body. What we put on our skin topically is absorbed. And that was radical to say 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what's so cool is that, you mentioned earlier in the interview that your mom knew it was going to be a global business, right? And this was like decades ago. And I want to bring that up because you even said, the first year you guys did like $10,000 out of your garage. You were in there for so long, growing 10% year over year. And I think people forget sometimes that it's like the consistency over time is what builds sustainable, real big businesses like OSEA. Like some people expect that overnight. I'm like, every successful founder similar to you, they've been doing this for 10 plus years behind the scenes. And I think so much of that is also the secret to success. Obviously, you need a solid product, but
it's just like not the story that we hear, because all we see are these. And I think really over the past 8 years, maybe, that's been the story that's been so highlighted in the entrepreneurial journey of like these really heavily funded businesses coming with a bang, hitting it really hard. And I think there's so much less of a focus on just what you said, which is like slow, sustainable growth. I've consistently made decisions that have actually slowed our growth. Listen, I'm very focused on growth. We'll grow 25 to 30% this year. We've had, at our scale, we're growing in a different range, but we've had years where we've had 100% growth.
mm-hmm.
But I could have done that way faster. And all I can say is like, it's really challenging. Just as I can say it on a couple levels, like as a leader, it's really challenging where we are right now. And because it's a whole new set of things. Like I've never done this. I'm working in the biggest company today that I've ever worked in because it's bigger than yesterday and bigger than a year ago. So, but also it's like, I don't want to be the overnight success company that just comes here and then disappears. I did a lot of things like Ulta, which is our main retail partner. They wanted to launch the products 3 years earlier. And I kept saying no because I just knew we couldn't sustain that. We didn't like, not only would it be really difficult for us in a cash wise to like sustain the inventory, but like we didn't have the team and the brand awareness to do it. And I've had so many options for like celebrity spokespeople, and I don't want to grow at an unsustainable rate, because I'm so proud that we were here 28 years ago, but what I'll be the most proud of is when we're here in another 28 years. And that's how I think about things, is like, how does this decision impact OSEA in 5 years or 10 years? And then sometimes I'm like, how do I fix something right this minute? But when I think the most focused, I'm thinking of that future. And slow is sustainable.
And even slow and sustainable is still hard. Like people, like I'm like, I've sold out a few times and I'm like, I lost like it was very stressful. It's like a blessing, right? It's all good problems to have, but I can't imagine really growing like significantly, and you don't have the team, you don't have the infrastructure like that. Like talk about peace of mind, which we were talking about before the podcast. I would be done. Like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I remember this moment when I realized like our best selling body oil in like 2017, we were selling 100 a month. Now we sell thousands and thousands a day. And to realize the cost of being out of stock for one day is like more revenue than we used to do in a month.
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
that's what I meant about the idea of like perfectionism getting triggered in a new way, because it's just, everything just grows. And like it took, as a founder who's also operator, CEO, like it took me time to grow into this too.
And that's what I want to talk about because you just said right now, like you've never done this before. And whatever, even when you do feel like, okay, you got this, things are good, the business gets to another level. So you are constantly living in this world of, I don't know what the F I'm doing, no matter what stage you're in, right? Like it's like once you feel like you got it, it's like, here you go. The business is like in a whole nother realm. So how do you deal with that? I don't know if it's like a mind game or the growth. Like, do you have a community? Do you have a coach? Do you have a therapist? Like, how do you manage that unknown that happens so often as a founder?
To your list, yes, yes, yes.
I know. Give me
uh,
all the things.
I think something that has helped me grow alongside the business is I just try everything. I've been to like you name a weird transformational program, I've tried it. Like a business coaching program, I've done it. I've had coaches, I mean therapy. Couldn't live without it. But I've done things that were really helpful at the time. I did something gosh, maybe it was about 5 or 6 years ago now. And it was this like coaching program once a month called Vistage. And it was me and 17 guys. I called it my men's group. And they were in totally different industries, like these really big construction companies and welding companies. And like, I asked someone, I'm like, oh, how many employees do you have? He's like, 500. And they thought what I did was so crazy because they couldn't even understand what Instagram was. But that was such an impactful year. I learned so much from those guys. And now I'm in YPO and have a forum, and that's really helpful. And I've just like always tried to find like a conference or like podcast, anything I can, because I think as leaders, like, listen, some of us have done it before, and that's really cool. And now I'm like, oh, it'd be so fun to
I
start
know,
something.
me too. I
I
think
feel
about
like
that.
I learned what to do.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I just constantly think like, how could I learn more? Because I'm just like have a whole new set of challenges that I never could have imagined.
I love that.
And there are things people have told me like, hey, watch it. When you hit 50 on your team, this is going to start to happen. And when you hit 20 million in revenue, this happens. When you hit 50, like all of those things, there's actually truth in all of the rumors.
Yes. And I love the like also you also have a self-awareness about yourself about what you don't know and you're okay with that and you just plug those gaps. You like you said you're always learning, you're always growing. And one thing that you had mentioned which I just want to highlight because another friend said she did something similar was like you were saying that men's group. She's like back in the day when my business was small, like I was the only woman with like 9 other guys in a CEO forum. She said it was the best things and they were all in different industries. So
You
because of
probably did the same one, like a CEO forum at whatever
yes.
size. That was so valuable for me.
Yeah. And so I just signed up for one that I came across and I kind of had like imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm like in wellness in a different world. Like they're all guys, they're all in different industries. And because of similar to your experience, I was like, you know what? It's worked for people. I'm open. So I think like trying different things, being open is always good. So I love to kind of hear how you're, always dabbling and learning and, there's always something you can take away from.
I never would have thought one of the big pieces that I learned, because I didn't go to business school, like I didn't learn all these things. I was a women's studies major. So um, I didn't even take statistics or math in college. Like I had to learn so much of this from them. But there was something I learned from that group that stuck with me, which is they were all like, wow, you're a really high margin company. So maybe you just focus on growth and deal with all your expenses later on, like lowering stuff. And I did that for a couple of years and it really escalated the growth. And then I got to come in and get like economies of scale and bring costs down. But, that came out of people in like running a cement company that were shocked by the margins in CPG. So I think that being amongst a diverse group of peers was really helpful for me.
And I'm just curious because I don't know if you know Gary V, but we like met him a few times. And I mean, I listened to like all of his content and and the way he runs his businesses is like, if something's working and you're profitable, like just invest in growth, like break even, and I'm in that position where, as a CEO, you are deciding like, what do you double down on? How much cash did you have? And it's very nerve wracking for me to be like, you know what, this works. Let's go all in, even though like we have margin. So I love that you also heard that perspective from them and you doubled down on growth more than you usually did, because it's just a interesting perspective to hear, because I'm always thinking about like how much growth do we invest in, like, so it's interesting to see that you went all in for a few years.
Yeah, the thing I'm thinking about right now on growth, because right now it's August of 2024. I didn't even know what year it was for a minute. Is that the next couple months are going to be really challenging with the election on paid, and so figuring out like times when we can go harder and when we need to pull back. So we really implemented that into our strategy this year. So I think that is like, I'm sure you have the same challenge of like, where do we push, and then where do we pull
With
back?
everything, even outside of marketing, like what do you invest in? Who do you hire in? It's like you're always playing chess of like what to put your capital towards, you
How
know? It's
many
like a
are gonna
game.
touch? Yeah.
I love it. Well, one thing I'm so curious to talk about also, which I did not know until I was doing prep on you, is that you guys are like truly a family business. I'd love to hear. I know you and your mom have been so instrumental, but you have more of the family involved. So tell me more, because I love to hear. I love to hear all of this.
Well, you know what? That has actually been a real journey. And my siblings are no longer working in the business after years. And now it's really my mom and I. But my stepdad worked in it, my siblings, everyone's kind of come in and out. And I'll say it's so fun working with family. My mom and I work really well together. We've
That's
been
good.
doing it so long. And it's also like such a challenge because who triggers you more in life than your family? Sometimes, like, I can be so contained and
Yeah.
calm with other people, and my family gets in the mix, and I'm like, ah. So I think it was and has been and continues to be like such an incredible opportunity to like grow and learn. And also the thing that's like, in terms of my mom, like I was an actual teenager when we started working together, and I was like a little bratty. I'd be like, "Mom, what are you talking about?" And sometimes I feel it come back up, and it's so interesting to like still be in the same place and doing the same thing, but just in such a radically different circumstance, and get to like watch my triggers. It's like going home for
Sure.
Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've regressed. So
Mhm.
I get an opportunity to regress daily. Learned how to mostly contain it.
Oh my God. Well, listen, before I started my business, I worked with my dad, and I'm the
Oh,
youngest. That, and like imagine like the daughter and then the dad, and we're both pretty like intense individuals. I probably get a lot of my qualities from him. And once I kind of knew the business, we really butt heads. Like it wasn't good at all. And he's like, yeah, it was tough. I mean, obviously we love each other, but like being in business together just did not work at all. But I love him, and I learned so much from my business. So it's always interesting. And now, for example, I work with my co-founder of my business is my sister-in-law, and we work really well, really, really well. So I think one of the biggest learnings that I had working with my dad, and also I brought my brother in that business. We work well together too, but is like me and my sister-in-law, we have two different skill sets, and we really trust each other on what we own, and we don't, we respect each other, and I think it works so well on that.
that's what makes my mom and I work so well together too.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we have some overlapping skill sets, but we're really focused on different areas.
That's great. Yeah, that's like one of the biggest learnings. Yeah.
We had the founder's wife of Patagonia, knew my mom through a mutual friend, but didn't really know her. And maybe 15 or 20 years ago was like, I want to take you out to lunch. And she had said they had so many family struggles, and they had really found that like a family coach and therapist made a
Mm,
huge difference. She gave my mom that advice really early on, and we took it. And I would, love to share her advice with anyone because it really made a difference. Because without like a forum to talk things through, those resentments, those feelings, they just add up and then compound it by all the family stuff with the business stuff. So that, I think, we don't really need it as much anymore, but for many years we really leaned on it. And if something comes up, we can go back into coaching. And if you're working with family, which is, as you well know, a special thing, I strongly suggest it.
oh, I love that. I could see that really, really working. So I love that she gave you that recommendation.
That was so cool that she like took the time and just the generosity of other women in business, which I love other women supporting each other. It's so cool.
Seriously. No, amen. I love that so much. And I know we're almost coming up on time, and you mentioned, and I'd love to talk about this. You mentioned how, you guys were bootstrapped for so long, and COVID hit, and I think was at the time where you were debating like, okay, maybe we bring in a partner. I'm sure so many people over the years wanted to invest in OSEA, and you guys were very selective. Again, you and your mom, like, it's a family business, it's your baby. It's not an easy move to just bring anyone in. So I'd love to hear maybe about, I guess you kind of explained why you decided to bring someone on and how that experience has been for you guys.
You're totally right. We got countless inquiries to invest for years. And I just always said no. In fact, I had like one of the largest CPG funds, the head of it, finally like sent people from his team to meet me at a trade show. They're like, would you go to lunch with him? And he was like, I just wanted to meet the person who said no to even meeting me. And I was like, well, truthfully, I didn't say this, but like I didn't click through the link to see what brands they had because I really didn't want to raise money. So that was a big lesson. The less you want it, the more they want you. It's kind of like dating.
Yeah.
So 2020 was really interesting. I have a best friend who lives in Hong Kong, and in December of 2019, she had told me like, you better start watching what's happening here. And so first couple weeks of 2020, I started noticing things going out of stock on Amazon. I was like reading news every day, and then basically went on a mission to acquire all the supplies we needed, get us in stock, because I thought it would just be a supply disruption. Everyone, and then I started like buying toilet paper and food. In like February, my family sat me down and they were like, we think we're really worried about you. We think you have mental issues. Then things changed. But basically what happened then is I spent all of our money manufacturing. And when things shut down in March of 2020, I really thought I had tanked the business. And I just spent a couple weeks crying. And then those days, like of anyone who was running a business, like just crying on Zoom with the team and had to let people go. And it was just, or furlough them at the time. Anyway, fast forward to a couple weeks later, we realized how low ad spends were that we could still keep shipping. And we proceeded to sell all that product and just kick up a whole other level of scale. And I think I would say what really drove me to decide to raise capital was that moment when I realized like, oh, we don't have another safety net. Like the business was it like is how we lived. Like we didn't have like some pool of money that was anything else, like except we worked to make money from the business. And like this was our entire everything. And I saw like that lens of like, oh, I could have lost everything. And so I decided, and I think so many of us in like 2020 was so crazy for so many people in so many different kinds of industries. I mean, it like was such a shift on everything. And that was the year that I was just like, okay, yes to everything. I said yes to Ulta. I said no to Ulta. I did that on Zoom in mid 2020. And I started taking a couple of the meetings coming for capital. It was, I never actually even talked about what the raise was like, but there had been this group called Kavu, which is focused on better for you CPG. And I had told them no, maybe like 10 times about meeting. And they were like, please just let us come. I was like, I don't even want to meet with you. And I got on a Zoom with them and I was like, I just like had such a hit of intuition. I was like, oh, wow, this is my partner. And they sent a term sheet within 24 hours and we just like went from there. And for me, it's been a great experience. They're a minority. They know that like we don't have a horizon of what we're doing at the business. They're just like so passionate about our mission. And they've provided a totally different lens because they have so much experience. So it's been easy and positive. And that's because I waited so long to do it. And it's a totally different kind of relationship. So I don't have like, and the woman who runs their CPG, Jenna Jackson, is incredible and has been such, is so amazing with, it's been awesome to have like also a woman who we work with. And it's been a great experience.
Yeah. And I love that. And do you feel like, I mean, I can't imagine being in the position where you are. And you're right, like you and your family's wealth is all tied to this business, at even feeling like, oh, wow, this could go to zero. Like I can't even
For
imagine.
security, like our page, yeah, it
And you're
was.
putting all your money in the business. It's like people, yeah, like the value of the business is great, but a lot of people don't, like, founders aren't sitting on liquidity because you're putting it all, you're doubling down on your business for the
Oh
most part,
yeah,
you
like you
know?
have a profit on the books, and you're just putting it right back in.
I know.
Now, we have a profit, and we just pay taxes and then put it back in the business. So
So I can imagine that being, really like not traumatizing, but like a good wake up call. Like, okay, maybe we do bring in someone. I love that it's minority. Again, like you guys have been doing so well. And I'm curious, like bringing a minority investor in, has it been helpful for you to have, I guess, partners? Because it's really been you for so long. So does it feel like, oh, I can actually reach out to someone? Or like, does it give you a sense of like a peace of mind, or it's a different kind of feeling you get bringing someone involved?
I told them, I was like, my biggest problem is going to be that I don't reach out to you. And they said I've held true to what I said in the beginning. But I find when I do, I get really helpful insight. As one example, switching from being like, kind of like our flow has been, first we were a spa business, then really focused on D2C. And then all that D2C attention brought us into retailers. And then opening a national retailer like Ulta was a really big shift to truly being an omni-channel business. And I have such a bootstrapping mentality. I didn't want to invest anything in Ulta. I was like, oh, you want me to pay for that initiative? No, thank you. And having a partner that has watched so many businesses scale at retail, I learned so much. And I really think that has affected the success we've had there. And it's still just a constant learning experience.
I love it. Well, Melissa, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I want to end on, one next question that I'm just curious about. Like, what's next for maybe your growth, or the business's growth? Like, what's kind of occupying your mental state right now?
So I'd say the biggest piece of growth I think ahead for us, the two things I think about a lot are one, which has been pretty constant, which is like maintaining. I'm now 28 years later in a highly competitive industry, and it was not. Probably within the past 15 years, that started changing. There was like the big players and then a bunch of us little ones. And now there's been so much capital in the market. There's so many new brands. There's so many nice, I said 10 years ago, there was not a product I would use. There's some really beautiful, clean products on the market now. Although, of course, I can only use OSEA still. But so I really think a lot about how to like maintain our position and relevancy as we continue to grow. And that keeps me up all the time. But what I'm really excited about is the next chapter of our growth, which is international. We've really grown all in North America and really in the US. And there is a whole world ahead of some really big markets and some really exciting trends emerging in clean and similar following like what's happened in the US. So that feels like a whole new set of challenges. I feel a level of confidence about growing in the US, but marketing internationally and carrying the brand to new markets is something I'm really excited about. We're launching actually in just a couple weeks in Australia and New Zealand.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's for this year, and lots more planned for the years ahead. So that's exciting. And then just really the other thing I would say I think about the most is how do we continue to stay true to exactly who we are in a changing landscape and continue to deliver the best value and the best products we can to our consumer.
Oh, well, I'm so excited. And I'm curious. I mean, you are always building and growing, and the business is just, booming, and there's so much for you to do. Like, how have you kind of maintained your level of, I don't like the word balance because I don't think any of us have balance, but like sanity, like what is a flow for you in this phase, right? Because obviously there's so much for you to do. Like, how do you flow with this next phase of your life that's coming with the business?
I think I need some help. I don't know. Um, it's a constant evolution. I'll go through phases where like my workflow. Okay, here's my answer I can give now, and maybe in a couple of years I'll have a different one. I think kind of just like accepting and going with the ebbs and flows. Like right now, I have a really big workload and a lot of pressure, and there's parts of it that I can now track through the year. Like I know come December I'm gonna have like mental relief, and this year the fall just started sooner. So starting to like follow that. Also, one thing is like I get so hormonal and so moody. Like
Yes.
it's not like have it now being in my 40s, like it's real. Like the hormones are so much more intense. So like taking a step back when my hormones are too intense, that's another thing I've learned.
That's great.
Because this is a podcast for women. I feel like I've got to say it
Oh,
because
yeah. I have a company all around hormones and using food, so we talk all about this. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
like
glad you're
learning
honoring
to
how
track
you
my
feel.
cycle. I'm like, oh, I'll be ovulating then. So yes, I can do
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
great.
well timed for our podcast.
Yeah.
But really, it's just, I think, like accepting that so much is out of my control and just continuing to show up and do my best and take care of myself and trust what's unfolding. To remind myself a lot. But the more I just listen to my intuition and follow, the more comfortable I feel.
I love it. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for being here. Oh my God, I learned so much from you, so inspired by you. And this was such a refreshing conversation. I feel like we talked about so much
I
real stuff.
I love it. Thank you. I needed this today. So thank you. I feel
Me
the same.
too.
I feel
Me too.
so invigorated and inspired.